everybody.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi, nice to see you all.
Hi, ma'am.
Hi everyone, lovely to see you.
Anusha ma'am and I were wondering, this will be an interesting thing to get a poll from everybody. Does anyone read the last few pages of a book before reading the book itself?
True.
Yes.
True.
I read the climax, like the chapter which is most interesting. Like based on book reviews, I read that chapter. Then I start from the beginning, so it kind of starts to make sense.
Terrible, absolutely terrible.
Anybody else? Do you read the last few pages of a book before you read the book itself?
Yes,
It's a ritual.
I do.
It has to happen in every book.
I never do that. This spoils the whole fun.
Spoils the whole fun for you. Yeah. Super. So, guys, we will take a few minutes to hear each other and say hi and chat a bit while we wait for people to join us. And in about 5-10 minutes, we'll jump into it. So, I'm curious for everybody waiting. Okay, you can put it in the chat. I'm curious where you're sitting right now. Which city you're sitting in?
Bangalore.
Bangalore. Yeah, me too.
Bye.
Pune.
Bye.
I'm in Sharjah.
Sharjah. Oh, cool. So now we have three
Mumbai.
countries. Did someone say Mumbai?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Hi, Krishna. Krishana? Krishana. Hi, Krishana.
Sana.
Pune.
Vadodara.
Vadodara. And Umar, what did you say?
Pune.
Pune. Okay. Fun. We have five. What did you say we have?
Mumbai.
Mumbai. Okay. Cool. Nice bunch of us already here, Anusha. We're going to be a nice big group today.
Yes.
So, how many of you are on the student WhatsApp group? Can you just say yes in the chat?
Yes, ma'am.
Put in the chat so that I can see the number of people. Oh, fun. I'll send the WhatsApp group link after the meeting as well for folks who want to join. But I see a good bunch of us.
And
Cool,
that
so
is
you are-
actually pretty fun.
Okay.
The questions.
The questions are pretty fun. What's been fun about it then?
Yeah. I mean, like summer holidays, your brain is kind of relaxed, but to kind of quirk things up, it's fun.
Nice. Yeah, mind marathon thing. That's right, Maharshi. That's what I'm talking about. Great. So,
You guys, sorry, Janani, I'm very excited about the dragon questions. So how many of you guys really enjoyed the dragon questions?
They were really fun, but I was not possible to get any of them.
Oh, there were only two, no? What was difficult about them?
I don't know. I don't think I've reached that stage. I'm still in, I'm going to grade 7, so.
Rishan, you want to say something? Your hand was up.
I think he was saying that he enjoyed the time.
No, ma'am, actually, restaurant.
It's
I
a-
like today's question. It is very interesting way to find out the answer.
Today's question.
Yes.
Okay, don't reveal the answer yet.
I broke my head over that question and I still haven't gotten it right.
Yeah, so don't
There was
spoil the answer.
somebody said, and
I
then
actually even asked my dad. Even he's stumped.
no, there was a change in the question. So
Just a
we had
formatting
to start
change, actually.
over. I just saw that message, so now I have to start all over.
Oh, fun. Maharshi says it reminded him of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the dragon questions. Oh,
Oh, wow. Good connection.
Do any of you guys here read Terry Pratchett, or is that a little high for kids?
I read some of his book. I read one of his books, and it was about this dragon and a castle, and there were many short stories in it.
Oh, okay. I need to check which one this is. Is it called Guards? No, this is a
No.
different one. This is short stories. Okay.
What question?
Which question are you talking about? We were talking about the dragon questions on the WhatsApp group. Are you part of that?
So
No.
I will share the WhatsApp group link also in the chat if anyone wants to join. It's just a
Thank you.
free group for students, and we are posting one challenge question per day. So very different types of questions. And if you want to join, you can just click the link and show it to your parents once also before joining. And Anusha, I think we can jump in, and as people join us, we can.
All right. Why don't you start off with your spiel, Janani, and then I'll take over after that.
Super. So I think a lot of you know who we are, and anyway, I shall take a minute to share. Yeah, so we are part of this community called Gifted World, and it's a free community that's available for any interested, students, and we have a bunch of master classes like Anusha's, and we're going to have a bunch of courses. So if you look at this events page that's up here, you'll see all the upcoming master classes like this one. So this is the next one. It's about design thinking and lateral thinking. And this is our courses page. So the courses you can decide, we can jump into, detail of various fascinating subjects. We'll talk about this, but in the meanwhile, I just want to hand it over to Anusha for today's masterclass. Anusha is a science communicator, and that means that she knows, she's really studied both science and how do you communicate about things, right? How do you story tell about things in such a way that other people can listen and find it interesting? And it means, like a lot of us on the call, she really loves books as well. So that's going to be a fun thing to talk about over time. And today is all about biology, and specifically about biology beyond textbooks. And I'll hand it over to Anusha to kick us off for today.
Thank you, Janani. All right. I'm going to share my screen, guys, and
Anusha, sorry, one quick interruption. A couple of ground rules, okay? So master classes can be really fun for us to chat about interesting things, but in the chat box, when Anusha is talking, I'm going to close it for public chatting, because every time you put one message, it opens the chat on everybody's computer, and we all look at the chat instead of looking at Anusha, right? Whenever she asks questions and she wants answers, she will let us know if she wants us to unmute and share, or if she wants us to share it in the chat. Okay, and we'll all sort of be good about doing that and good about chatting correctly about the topic. Towards the end, we'll have lots of Q&As and chat will be open and you can make friends again. All right, over to Ansha, sorry.
all right. Thank you. Yeah. So just let me know once you guys can see this.
Yeah, we can see.
All right, great. So today's masterclass is going to be about the games that nature plays. Okay. And what I'm going to talk about is how in nature you're going to have allies. So there are going to be friendships that are there in nature. There are going to be cheaters who cheat on the friendships. And there is just a huge amount of drama, most of it which is very sad in the textbooks that I've seen in the biology textbooks. It doesn't show you all of this. Okay. So in your biology textbooks, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Most of the time, it's like these long names. You have to remember a species name. So you just can't say tiger. You have to say Panthera panthera. Then there are all these horribly complicated diagrams, you've seen, you have to draw the diagram of the heart, and then you have to figure out where blood goes in, where blood comes out, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And a lot of times it also happens that you have a huge list of things to mug up in biology. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why I have seen a lot of people not like biology very much. It very unlike physics, very unlike chemistry, very unlike maths, where you can sit and work out stuff. Sometimes for biology, you really do need to mug up stuff. But the mugging up doesn't have to be that boring. It can be fun. And the way that it can be fun is when you delve a little deeper into the whole situation, and you try and figure out whatever it is that you're reading up on and whatever it is that you need to know more about and mug up about has its own unique life and unique flavor. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for today. Right. So like I said, biology is very much like a movie or a game. There is a huge amount of drama happening. In fact, you can just walk outside, go to a garden and sit there and watch insects and plants, and you'll realize how much drama there is. Okay, there's a lot of strategy. So animals, life is really difficult, and animals use a huge number of different strategies just to be able to survive. We as humans may not really do that much, but animals do it all the time. Okay. In fact, if I'm right, humans also do it quite a bit, but we're not going to talk about that today. Yeah. And you'll also see teamwork, you'll see trickery, you'll see change. All of this happens in the world around us. And if it's there in your textbook, great. But if it's not, then, I'll try and teach you guys a little bit about it today. Okay. Yeah. So like I said, life is hard. So what is the motivation for an animal to be doing what it is doing, animal or plant? Okay. So at the beginning of this presentation, what Janani told me was that, don't just tell the kids whatever it is that you want to tell them, make them think a bit. So here's the thinking process for you guys. Have a piece of paper and a pen, not the other way around. And in all the examples that I'm going to be talking about today, think about what are the obstacles that an animal or a plant is facing. So in all the examples that I'm going to give you, just think about them a little bit and think about how they have overcome these obstacles. Okay, I'm going to give you some answers. You guys are going to think and you'll get those answers. But here's the interesting thinking part of it. Do you think you could have solved that animal or plant's problem better? And if you could have done it better, how would you have done it? Or if you think that a particular solution that animal or plant has come up with is fantastic, why do you think it's fantastic? So for today, at the end of this session, what I want you guys to think about is not just, imbibe whatever I'm telling you, but also think in terms of, if you had to tell somebody about it, what would you highlight and what would you tell them? Okay, right. So we'll start off, with something really nice, which is, when life is hard, things become better when you have a partner. So we'll start off by talking about partnerships in nature. And there are many different kinds of partnerships, but the one that I want to focus on today is mutualism. So mutualism is a condition where, species, two or more species, usually it's two of them, they help each other out. Now, mutualism is not the same as cooperation and symbiosis. I'm sure you guys have heard of these terms. They're probably there in your textbooks. And I just want to clarify what these two terms mean. And they don't mean mutualism all the time. Cooperation usually happens between individuals of the same species. Okay, so if there are two humans and they want to get a task done, they will cooperate with each other and do it. Sometimes, not sometimes, when you see birds feeding their chicks, that's cooperation. Your mommy bird and the daddy bird, they go out, get stuff, and they feed the chicks. That is cooperation. That's not necessarily mutualism. Usually mutualism is between two separate species. Okay? Symbiosis. Symbiosis means living together. So the picture that I'm showing you on the bottom part is a tick. Okay. So a tick lives on a pigeon or an animal, and they kind of live together, but they're not really mutualists. This is a situation where symbiosis essentially means living together. So you can have many different types of relationships, but they're all living together, so they all come under the umbrella of symbiosis.
Ma'am,
Okay.
can symbiosis be helpful to another person? Like, say, like something is latched on to some other thing. Can that be helpful, or is it only like parasitic?
No. So what I'm trying to say is symbiosis can mean, it's a broad term to involve mutualism, to involve parasitism, and something called commensalism. So commensalism is when two animals or plants or whatever, organisms live together, but neither of them really gets, an advantage with that living together. They just live together. Parasites is where one organism gains, the other one does not gain. There's a negative effect on it. Mutualism is when both the organisms gain from that, interaction. Okay, right. So what is the most common form of mutualism that you guys can think of? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead. Umar?
Yes, the most common mutualism I see is, you can see when a farmer is feeding the dogs, the farmer is feeding the chicken, because
Okay. All right. All right. Maharshi?
Some mutualism I've seen is that sometimes when crocodiles open their mouth, cleaner birds come into their mouth, which take off the bits of junk that is there in their mouth after they have eaten a meal. Which
Mhm.
for the crocodile, it cleans up its mouth, and the birds get their food.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'll take these two questions, these two answers for now. We'll pause. And I'm really surprised that you guys didn't pick up on the most common mutualism that you're kind of taught in school.
I got it from the picture
There
only.
is a picture, exactly.
Pollination.
Yes, pollination is one of the most common mutualisms that you guys will see in textbooks, especially. Okay.
Raise your fingers.
So, yeah, just to give you
I
an,
don't know
an
how it is bound
introduction
to the
and a
same
clear
time.
definition of what mutualism is, it's a relationship between two or more different species. There can be more than two species, but usually we talk about two. And what they do is those species exchange either goods. Goods means it could be food, it could be something else. I can't really think of building material, it could be housing, it could be something else. Okay. And services. Services are when, like somebody pointed out here, the birds clean out the crocodile's teeth. So it's a cleaning service that they have given. Okay. And both the, whoever's part of that mutualism, they benefit. It's a win-win situation. Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah. Go ahead. Who's
Ma'am,
asking?
can I tell an uncommon mutualism?
Right. Quickly. Is that Aiden?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am,
yes.
when a honey badger and a honey bird work together, when they go to feed on nectar, the honey
Mhm.
bird tells the honey badger where the honey is. The honey bird is not strong enough to take the honey, so the honey badger rips the rips the beehive and takes the honey, and both of them get food.
Fantastic. So what's also interesting in all the examples that you guys have mentioned over here is all of them are examples of mutualism, but they are not examples of symbiosis. These animals don't always live close together. Okay. So you can have mutualisms which are symbioses where the animals live very closely together, animals and plants, and mutualisms where they don't live closely together. They come together, they have the mutualistic interaction, then move around. Okay. All right. Yeah. So one of the most common examples is bees and plants for pollination. And then, of course, there is, if you guys have watched Finding Nemo, anemones and clownfish. So anemones provide clownfish with protection, and the clownfish usually provide anemones with food. Okay, right. Now we're going to have a quick game. Okay, and I would like you guys to put in your answers in the chat box. Okay. So I'm going to show a pair of mutualists, and you guys have to tell me what each partner gets. Okay. So I think the first one is pretty easy. Somebody gave that example between plovers and crocodiles. Plovers are birds and crocodiles are these huge reptiles. So what do you think is the exchange that happens, and what does each partner get?
And guys, put it in the chat for now. I'll read it out. Clover gets food, crocodile gets cleaned.
Yes, that was the correct one. All right, let's move on. If it's an ants, what do you think each partner here gets?
So aphids get protection, ants get food.
Fantastic. So a very cool thing about this is that, ants actually use, they kind of herd the aphids a lot like how we guys do with cattle. And there are times when, if aphid colonies are not doing very well, they'll eat up the aphids also. So it's almost pretty much like dairy farming that the ants do. All right. You've got algae and fungi, which are known as lichen. The organisms are known as lichen. What does the alga get and what does the fungus get?
Algae gets protection, lichen gets food, algae gets shelter, fungus gets food.
Yes, that is also correct. So essentially, algae live within these little structures that the fungi create. And there is actually one more point over here. The fungi also help in collecting raw materials for the algae. So absorption of certain nutrients happens through the algae. Sometimes the algae, happens through the lichen. So the algae require micronutrients. They require, small amounts of various elements, which, sometimes the fungi are able to take up and give them. Okay, right. Plants and fungi. How many of you guys have actually heard about this?
Looks like a few people have heard about it.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
5 hands up.
All right. So are people typing, or shall we ask somebody to give them a turn to talk?
Umar says fungus gets food, fungi decomposes food, and plant gets nutrition, is what Aiden says.
Okay. You're kind of there, but not exactly
Plants
right.
get nitrogen, fungi get shelter.
Plants get nitrogen, fungi get shelter. It's
Plants
not
get
complete.
shelter and fungus gets nitrogen.
It's the other way around.
Fungus gets food and plants can communicate.
Okay.
Plants health, fungus gets shelter.
Mhm.
Plants communication, fungus nutrition. Plants get nutrition, fungus gets glucose.
I think that's one of the best answers around. Okay, so this is very multifaceted, and there is a lot of stuff that's happening over there in this particular mutualism. So what happens is the fungus helps in expanding the root system of the plant, and it helps the plant to absorb minerals and to absorb water in a much more efficient fashion. So and what the fungus gets is both shelter as well as food. So the plant does give the fungus glucose, and the fungus essentially helps the plant to absorb nutrients from the soil. So, and yes, like you said, the side effects of all of this is that the fungus also helps plants communicate, though I'm not sure how much of that is well known, but yeah, you guys got it right. Yeah, coral and zooxanthellae.
There's a bunch of interesting conversation about the previous example. We'll circle back to it
All right.
perhaps at the end.
Okay.
This, if anyone has an idea, perhaps you can raise your hand and we can unmute and ask you. I think this has stumped us, Anusha.
Really? Okay.
Us guessing that coral gets glucose and oxygen and zooxanthellae gets shelter.
Okay, yes. So it's a food for shelter situation. So corals are these organisms that can form they use calcium to form these really strong structures, and the zooxanthellae take up residence in these structures, and they produce food essentially. So it is, the coral gets food in return for housing the zooxanthellae.
So also Anusha, quick, folks are asking what is exactly a zooxanthellae?
Okay. A zooxanthella is even I'm stumped. I don't have a proper answer. It's a lot like an alga. It is an organism that can produce food. It has chloroplasts, and it can produce food using water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. Does that answer the question? It's not a plant, but it is an organism that can do all of that. Any more questions there? Or
Which are bacteria is the question.
are they bacteria? I'm sorry, I will need to check on that and let you guys know.
I shall check. There's a response to the next image.
Oh, okay. There's already a response. All right. It's humans and bacteria. I'm sure you guys know about this. There's so
Bacteria gets food, humans get food digested. Bacteria gives protection and body gives shelter to the bacteria.
okay.
Humans get proper digestion, bacteria gets housing.
Proper digestion. No, there is a little more than just the proper digestion. There's a very important thing that the bacteria gives us back. What is it?
Bacteria helps digestion and prevents disease and gets safe in environment.
Mhm.
Yeah, humans, health and digestion, bacteria, shelter is what is the general answer that's coming up.
All right, all right. So there is a little more to all of this. In that, yes, the bacteria get both food and shelter inside the human gut. And as a
Ma'am,
side effect, sorry, yeah, as a
they
side effect,
also save us from they
whoever
also save us from diseases.
no, they don't save us from diseases. To me, I think it feels like a side effect of them living with us in that, so good bacteria manage to outlast the bad bacteria. So as long as you have good bacteria, you don't have stomach issues. So that's more of a, side effect of having the good bacteria. Okay. And one of the things that they really help with, like you said, is with immunity. So bacteria are important for our immune systems. But more than all of that, a lot of bacteria in the gut produce something called vitamin K. Does anyone know what vitamin K is important for?
Is it blood clotting?
Yes, you're right. So the bacteria in your gut are not just there to help you digest the food. They do that. That's also important. But a very, very important requirement for those bacteria in your gut is that they produce vitamin K, which is very important for blood clotting. Right. Arhansh has his hand up.
Yes, ma'am. The bacteria gives vitamin K, and one more function
Mhm.
is also that it helps in healing wounds and cuts.
That's a little not very clear right now. So I won't say that they help in healing the wounds. They keep our immune systems active and they help the immune system, but I wouldn't say that bacteria directly help heal wounds. Okay? Yeah. Cleaner fish and sharks. This is an easy one. As a quick side question, can you guys identify that huge fish that's got its mouth open? I know all of you guys probably like watching these nature shows. So can you identify that big fish?
So Raghav says eel.
Yes.
Everyone says cleaning in exchange for food.
Cleaning fantastic. Yes. And whoever Raghav is, fantastic. 1,000 points to Raghav for figuring out what that is. That's a moray eel. Okay. Termites and fungi. What do you think this situation is? I can see there are some interesting answers coming up. Janani has a big grin.
No, it's quiet after a question because everyone's busy typing and they're not yet. Termites get food, fungi get clean spaces. Termites food, fungi also food from termite dropping, so food for food. Fungi orders and food. Orders, I'm not sure what orders refers to. Fungi gets protection, termites get food. Termite provides food, fungi provides aid.
No, it's
Fungus,
yeah, okay, go ahead.
yeah, fungus helps termite to decompose plants. These are all the guesses.
Okay, so essentially it is a food for food situation. So
Ah.
the termites can't digest all the stuff that they get from outside, which is the plant material. So what they do is they chew it up and then they lay it on their combs inside their huge termite mounds. And the fungus grows on that and then produces food for the termites. And, it essentially is like an exchange of food for food. The termites also help by making sure that only this fungus, only their helpful fungus grow, and that, other weedy fungi do not grow there. So it's a very agriculture kind of a situation. If you think about it, that's exactly how plants manage us humans. Okay, right. So there are a couple of really special cases also, and you guys tell me what you think about this. What do you think is that situation happening with figs and fig wasps?
Ma'am, I think this is like a parasitic kind of situation. I mean, I don't think the figs are benefiting.
Okay, you'd be surprised.
I think that the figs don't get benefited, but the fig wasps get a place to live and lay their eggs.
Okay, you're getting there, but you're right about the fig wasps laying their eggs inside the figs, but the figs also get something in return. What do you think that could be?
Their their poop.
No, not poop.
I can
Something
answer
else.
that question.
Guess from the chat. Fig wasps get food and figs get protection.
I can.
Okay, so the fig wasps get both food and protection, but it's not for themselves, it's for their babies. Okay, so, but what does the fig get?
The fig gets pollinated.
Yes, fantastic answer. So the figs and fig wasps have this amazing mutualism where there are like around 150 different species, 750 species of figs. And for each of those figs, there is one particular species of fig wasp that pollinates it. And the way that this pollination happens is that a female fig wasp will go into the fig, she'll pollinate flowers, and then she will lay some of her eggs inside those flowers. So that fig actually acts as a nursery, not only for its seeds, but also for its wasps. Okay?
Ma'am, how can a seed get pollinated? Isn't the
No. It's not a
flower.
seed that gets pollinated. So the inside of the fig is actually a bunch of flowers. Okay. It's not just one flower, it's like a huge collection of flowers. All right. And when the female fig wasp goes inside that fig, she'll spread pollen on many of the flowers, and in some of the flowers, she will lay her eggs. So the flowers that get pollinated will form seeds. The ones in which the egg is laid, that one will develop into a fig wasp.
So every time you're eating figs, you're actually eating fig wasps' eggs?
No, you're not. So two things. One is that usually the figs that we get to eat, those are parthenocarpic. So those are fruits that develop without pollination. Okay. The other thing is, usually when you tend to eat figs, wild figs, by then the wasps have already gone out. Okay. So when you have to eat a fig, you usually eat a fig when it's ripe. And at that stage, the fig wasps have already left the fig.
Do they
Okay,
go
so
out to the top or the bottom?
it depends. So some of them can go out through the top over here. There's a hole called an ostiole. Otherwise, the male fig wasps, the boys, they have these really strong jaws and they bite a hole through either the sides or the bottom, and the females go out.
So the guess for the yucca is that pollination in exchange for laying eggs. Same.
Yes, exactly that. So what's really cool is that this is a situation you can think of as where, it blows my mind, because this is a situation where instead of animals cultivating plants, it's plants cultivating animals. So you've got these plants, which is the figs, and you've got another plant, which is the yucca, and they both thought the same thing. And they said, why do I have to wait for pollinators to come and pollinate me? I'll just grow my own. And, you've got this fantastic situation. Okay. Yeah. Ants and plants. What do you think this situation?
The ants eat dead leaves of the plants that will help the plant to decay its, you can say, dead leaves.
Pollination for food. Another guess.
Another guess? Someone
And
else?
insects from the plants, and plants give shelter.
Yes, fantastic. Who was that?
Wait, it's coming in too fast. Zayan. And
Okay.
I have another guess.
Okay.
Plants. Some plants have these things called extra floral nectaries.
Uh-huh.
So they get food from those as well, and then in return they provide protection to plants from pests like aphids and caterpillars.
Fantastic. Yes. So this particular situation is one of the classic ones where you've got extrafloral nectaries, which are nectaries which produce sweet liquid, but they're outside of flowers. So they're near the bases of leaves, at the base of a leaf. You can see that over here. And you've got this situation where this is known as a bullhorn acacia. This plant produces these huge and hollow spines. And these ants go make a hole over there and they live inside that, and they protect the plant from anything that wants to eat the plant. So
I have
yes,
another guess.
yeah, go ahead.
The plants provide the ants with food and the ants protect it from herbivores.
It's exactly that. So the plants provide food as well as shelter, and the ants provide protection. So good job. Yeah. So now, what do you think this situation is? There are these bunch of very interesting wasps, which are hunters. Okay. And they have a very interesting relationship with plants. What do you think this could be?
How
Ma'am,
do the ants protect the plant from herbivores?
Can we, circle back to that a little later? Usually the ants are biting ants, so they will go and bite the herbivores and, drive them away. Or, if the herbivores are insects, they will eat up those insects. So, but we'll come back to that a little later.
Thank
Let's
you.
focus on the next one. Wasps and plants.
Wasps get hosts for their eggs, plants get pest control.
Yes,
Wasps
fantastic.
pollinate the plants.
Okay.
There are two
I
suggestions.
was about to say that looking by the pictures.
Okay. So looking at the pictures, it's pretty clear. It is pest control. And what's really cool in this pest control situation is that plants actually call out for help. So when they're being eaten by caterpillars or when there are aphids on the plant, they send out these chemical signals, which the wasps home in on, and then they'll come and lay their eggs on these herbivores, and the plant gets protection from being eaten or being attacked. Okay. So this is a situation where I always think of as plants hiring hitmen to protect themselves. So both the ant situation as well as the wasp situation is essentially just that. Okay. Right. Okay. So Janani, you want to, circle back to the motivation questions over here, and do people have you guys thought about what the motivations have been for different situations, and how do you think you could have done it better? Yeah, Krishana?
The motivation for the animals or anything that helps the plants is to get food and shelter,
Okay.
and the plants need to have protection.
Okay.
So that's the motivation because they need that to survive.
Okay. Can you think of something else? So all of you guys think of maybe one particular, we've gone through a whole set of different types of, mutualisms. So if you can pick one of the mutualisms, pick one of those partners and think perhaps you could have done it better, or, what is driving that mutualism? What else do you think the ants can give these plants? Yeah, Daivik?
Ma'am, following to the ant and plant example,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the ants and plants could develop like a form of communication, like how you said, like the wasps. They send out like a chemical signal saying, help me, help me.
Mm-hmm.
So if the ants could also communicate back to the plant, that would be like super cool. Like
Okay.
it
So
would
you're
be like a
thinking
two-way
of-
communication.
Right. So you're thinking, what would make this better would be a two-way communication.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. Riansh, you want to say something?
Maybe the ants give the plants fertilization.
Fertilization. We'll come back to that later, Krishana. Riansh, you have your hand up?
Yes, if you help somebody, they will help you back.
Okay. That's a fairly broad thing. All right. Maharshi?
Ma'am, for according to me, the motivation is for food and shelter, and I guess the motivation is for living itself. They have the motivation that I want to live. That might be their motivation.
Okay. Right. Krishiv?
Yeah, like in the honey badger and the honeybird, the honeybird gets a free guardian for its home because honeybird eggs are very tasty for predators, and the honey badger gets to eat a whole honeycomb, which actually it can survive on for a few days.
Okay. I don't think that honey badgers protect the honeybird's eggs,
Yes,
but
sometimes they do.
sometimes they
They go and live in their home because
Oh,
usually honey badgers are nocturnal, so they
Mhm.
don't disturb each other. But if they are tempted, then the honey badgers also eat honeybird's eggs.
Oh, okay. So it's a situational thing. All right.
Yeah.
Vishan?
Yes, ma'am. So about the ant and plant situation, in the food chain, after the decomposers, it
Mhm.
goes back to the plants and then the food chain starts over again. So
Mhm.
I think there may be like some sort of connection based on the food chain between ants and plants because ants are decomposers and
Mhm.
plants are producers. So maybe the plant is maybe getting some sort of food also from the ants.
That's a really cool point, Vishan. So ants are not decomposers, but there are situations, there are ant-plant interactions where ant waste, that is their poop, helps to fertilize the plant. And the plants get a lot of nitrogen from the ant's poop. So yes, you're right. There are situations where it's not just food for the ant and protection for the plant, but there is food for the ant, food for the plant, plus protection for the plant. So fantastic. That's a really good point that you've made. Zoe?
I was about to say that ants actually turn the soil and help oxygen and water travel through the plant for sometimes.
As far as I know, that doesn't happen, but ant poop really helps with the fertilization process. Okay. Yeah. Umar?
Actually, I wanted to make sure whether this process I had heard of is symbiosis. I've heard that this honeybee, when it wanted nectar from a particular pitcher plant, it saw that there's a gap when it falls down into the pitcher, and so there's a gap it can go from. So it allowed itself to go from the gap. So is this symbiosis or is this parasite or is this co-evolution?
I am not sure about this particular situation, Umar. I'll need to read up a bit about it. And I don't understand if that gap is something that the plant has created or honeybees have really strong jaws. So it could have just chewed its way out. So
Yes.
I will check up on that and perhaps get back to you. All right. Okay. So moving on, I think a lot of you have answered and we've got some really interesting answers. We'll move on from the point of, symbiosis and mutualism. And we will move on to a situation where you know that nobody, people sometimes do not play fair. Okay. So now what we're going to look at is cheaters. All right. Sometimes there are these really sneaky cheaters who can exploit a mutualism. So there is somebody who comes here and says, okay, let's exchange services or exchange stuff. But one of them is a cheater and decides that they will not give whatever they have promised to give, but they will take what the other partner is ready to give. Okay. So cheaters use the services offered in a mutualism, but they give nothing back. All right. And cheaters could either be from outside the mutualism or they could be one of the partners in a mutualism. Okay. Or like I said, it could be another organism outside of the mutualism. So here's a fantastic example of a cheater who is a partner in a mutualism. Now, there are some honeybees and some bumblebees who are nectar robbers. So you can see these little holes over here, right? So sometimes what happens is that life is difficult and the bee just doesn't have the time to crawl into each plant to get to the nectar. So it decides, you know what? I don't have the time for this. I don't have the energy for this. So just to make life a lot easier for me, I am going to steal nectar. And what they do is they chew through the base of the flowers and they get the nectar. But in this process, what happens is the plant loses out. They don't get pollinated. Okay, right. So here are a couple of examples where partners can be cheaters. Riyansh, just hang on. Let me finish up with a couple more things and then we'll discuss. Okay. Yeah. Ants. So when you have your ant plant interaction, sometimes you have really abusive ants. Although they protect the plant from herbivores, They also tend to sometimes be a little overprotective and they will attack any insect that comes near. So there are cases where ants actually eat up pollinators, and so, they are not really doing the plant any favors. Okay. And like somebody said, initially you guys thought that fig wasps, all they did was lay eggs and they didn't give anything in return. But it turns out that that situation also exists. There are cheating fig wasps. There are fig wasps that will get into a fig, lay their eggs and not give any pollination services. Okay. So given these situations, how do you think, okay, I've got other cheaters also, I'm sorry. So there are other cheaters, and given the situation with the fig wasps, you've got these other types of fig wasps that will not get into a fig to pollinate. They will sit outside the fig and then they use, they have a long tail, which is an egg-laying organ, and they will drill into the fig and lay their eggs. So this is a situation where you have a cheater that is outside of the two mutualists. Okay, you've got fungus cheaters. So there are these weedy fungi that sometimes, if a patch is not being tended properly by termites, the good fungus is not allowed to grow, and these weedy fungi start to grow. All right. Yeah. So coming back, I think somebody had a question. Lavitra?
Yes, ma'am. So in the case of those plant eater ants, so they basically eat the leaves of the plants. So like if they eat it, the surface area for photosynthesis, it gets reduced, and
Okay.
so it can affect the plant as because it reduces the amount of food produced by the plant. So yeah, that could be an example of like how ants could be cheaters.
Okay, I don't think that this comes up in the ant plant mutualisms. What you're talking about is ants
Leaf
that,
cutter ants.
yeah, no, it is with ants, but it is in the situation that is similar to termites. So those are leaf cutter ants, which cut out leaves and they take the leaves,
Cultivate
they
fungi.
grow fungi. Yes. So that's not a situation here where what I'm talking about in terms of partners who are cheaters are when you have an ant plant interaction, as in you have two partners. The ants are protecting the plant, but they become overprotective and they don't allow pollination to happen. Okay,
Okay.
that's very different from the leaf cutter ant situation. Okay,
Mm.
yeah. So now, given that you've got all of these cheaters, how can the partners protect themselves from cheaters? So figs have a really interesting way of doing this. What they do is that if a fig does not get enough pollen, it just, it's cut off from the plant. The plant just decides to abort the fig. So that's actually a really sad situation because now there are no fig wasps and there are no figs and no seeds either. Okay. Termites, how do they punish cheating fungi? Is that they bury them. So there was this really cool set of experiments where scientists put these weedy fungi near termites and then tried to see what the termites did. Initially, they thought, they would probably pull the fungus out and throw it somewhere. But no, what the termites actually do is they get soil, they get whatever stuff is nearby. In this case, it's some sort of a gel, and they make little pellets and then they pile the pellets on top of the weed fungus, and the weed fungus dies because of not enough oxygen or whatever. Okay, right. Okay. Any other questions? We're going to again move away from mutualism and move away from cheating and go into something known as deception. Janani, do you want to take a quick break in this, or shall we continue?
I don't see any questions in the chat, though Dhruv has raised his hand. So
All right. Yeah, Dhruv?
What is weed fungus?
Weed fungus is a fungus that does not give the termites any food. So these fungi just grow wildly and they will not, give the fungus any food.
So why does the termites kill the weed fungus?
It's the same situation. If you have a garden and you're growing food in it and you have a weed, what would you do? You would pull it out, right? Because it's not really giving you back anything. So that's why the termites remove the weedy fungus. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Aiden?
I don't have a question, but I have an example for mimicry.
For mimicry. Okay. Can we keep that to after we actually go through some of the examples?
Okay, ma'am.
All right, cool. Shivardhan? Shivardhan, you can unmute and say what you want to say. Yeah.
Actually, I had missed the class till now. I joined right now. Like, will we be sent the like a recording of the class or something?
Yeah, there's a recording, Shrivadan. I'll share it after the class. Yeah? Okay, great. Anusha, over to you then.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so now moving away from mutualisms, we'll go on to talking about how there's more drama in nature. And in this case, it's not cheating, but it's to do with deception. Okay. And the types of deception that you see very commonly in nature is camouflage and mimicry, right? So we'll start off with camouflage, which is essentially fading into the background. How do animals fade into the background? So quick question, has anyone actually seen this insect over here?
I
Yes,
have.
ma'am.
Yes, you have. Okay, so this is a leaf insect. And if you look at it, it's just amazing in terms of such an amazing form of mimicry. It's even got veins that you see on leaves. And it's just, to me, it always blows my mind when I see these insects. Okay, and the other insect, have you guys seen this?
Yes, I've seen this before. It's a
Yes.
stick insect.
The stick insect, correct. Okay, yeah. So these are examples of herbivores which camouflage themselves for their protection. Okay, right.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
but if it was a herbivore, like an omnivore, who eats insects and leaves, can also eat the leaf insect, thinking it's a leaf.
I doubt that. A leaf insect is able to run away, so it's highly unlikely that it will get eaten by a herbivore. Okay.
Ma'am, camouflage is two ways, predator and prey.
True, but we'll come to all of that a little later. Okay, right. So, when it comes to both camouflage and mimicry, there is something that is very basic that you need to understand that happens in nature, which is that all animals and all plants give out signals. So one of the very common signals that animals give out is to look scary and to tell other animals or other predators that, look, you can't eat me because I'm scary. And that's something that you see in nature. So there are these beautiful poison dart frogs, which are fantastic examples of how animals signal scary things. So they say, look, I'm really poisonous and therefore I'm this bright red or bright yellow color. Don't eat me.
The brighter they are, the more poisonous they are.
Yes. So, but then, that's not always the case, because you have a whole bunch of these animals that have figured out that, bright colors will probably scare off predators, because predators have figured out that bright color means more poisonous. But by mimicking these bright colors, the animals or insects that are actually edible are also not eaten by predators. So again, it's a form of protection that quite a few different types of animals practice. Okay. So for example, this wasp has this bright black and yellow coloration, and it's kind of warning predators, look, I can sting, I can bite, don't come near me. But then there are these hoverflies which say, doesn't matter, I'm just going to mimic these and hopefully predators will leave me alone. On the other hand, it's also interesting to see that bees, which also can sting, have a similar kind of yellow and black coloration. So essentially, it's like, both the wasps and bees use similar signals to tell predators, look, you'd better stay away from us. Okay, right. Has anyone heard of these examples?
Yes, it's
Yes.
the I
ma'am.
think it's a
It's
milk
the coral
snake.
snake and the scarlet snake.
Yes. So if you guys know your snakes, the coral snake is a very, very, very poisonous snake. But then there are these king snakes and scarlet snakes, which are not poisonous, but they decided, hey, if we have the same kind of coloration, hopefully predators will leave us alone, right? Have you guys heard of this particular example? It's called an elephant hawk moth caterpillar.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? And it's really cool because normally it kind of looks like this. But if it knows that there's a predator nearby, it will puff up its head in such a way that the head actually looks like a snake's head. And what's cool is that these caterpillars are pretty large. So, the caterpillar can be almost as big as my finger, as thick as my finger. So, when the caterpillar suddenly puffs up its head, it's pretty startling for a bird or anything else that's trying to eat it.
And there's a similar thing. There's an iguana like that, and it puffs out its neck.
Frills, right? Yeah, that also is that's less of mimicry and more of
Intimidation.
it's intimidation. You're right.
And pufferfish would also
I
be
have
an
seen
example.
the whole, ma'am, I have also seen the whole thing in a moth. I read about it. It was like a moth with wings,
Opens its
which are
wings.
like
Yes.
snake. Yes, something like that.
Right, not snakes. So moths have these things called eye spots. So they look like the eyes of another organism. So whatever, usually moths are being eaten by bats or by birds. So usually in the case of birds, they get startled when the moth suddenly opens up its wings and sees those eye spots. Okay.
Ma'am,
Okay, I have a question for you guys. In what situation can the elephant hawk moth, will that particular mimicry for the elephant hawk moth not work?
When there's things around it, like when there's
Right
lots of
ecosystem.
Not that. No, not that.
Mimicry. Ma'am, what if it's also like a mimicry predator or a camouflaging predator?
No, not that.
What if it can't see its predator? Like the predator comes from behind?
All right. No, usually these things can also feel the predator. So they feel vibrations. It's not that.
Ma'am, what is a
Something else.
predator? Is a snake.
What if snakes usually don't go about eating, caterpillars?
Just while thinking over here, what if there's a predator who likes to eat snakes, but it sees this and it thinks that is a snake and it eats this only?
So usually the predators that like eating snakes tend to
Ma'am,
be
like
much
a stork.
larger and they go after larger snakes. This one tends to be small, so it's not that either.
Ma'am, like a bird, like a stork, eats both snakes and insects.
Right?
So it could eat
You're
the
right. You're perfectly right. So that could be one of the situations. But there's another one. How do plants tend to protect themselves?
Chemical warfare.
Okay, that's
They
one.
tend to
But
close sometimes.
Other animals.
we just spoke about this
Other
some time
animals.
back. What do hybrids
Mutualism with
do?
other animals. Mutualism with ants and wasps.
Yes. So
Yeah.
ants and wasps don't have that much vision and nor are they really scared of snakes. So in such a situation, if you've got ants or wasps trying to eat this caterpillar, their mimicry is not going to work. Right? Okay. All right. So apart from all of this, so until now, what we have looked at is situations where the mimicry has been more in terms of protection. But mimicry can also be offensive in the sense that it can be used by predators to lure prey. Okay. So here are a couple of examples, and you guys have to tell me what is a lure that is being used by the predator here. Okay.
Ma'am, I would just like to say one more example.
it looks like a flower. So,
Just
so
one
when
minute.
animals come to eat it, the orchid mantis
Hold
eats
on.
the.
Hang on, stop. I didn't stop. Let Srivardhan finish and then we'll go on. Yes, you're right about what you're saying. But you'll get a chance.
The octopus and sea urchin, they mimic a more dangerous octopus or a larger one, which actually scares off predators because they hide in a gap in the seafloor.
Yeah, but that's an example of what happens in the previous situation where we've moved on to how predators use deception. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Who was speaking before?
Ma'am,
Yes.
when bugs come to eat flowers, they think the orchid mantis is a flower. When they come close, the orchid mantis quickly strikes the bugs and eats it.
Fantastic. So yes, that is one way that orchid mantis looks like a flower and lures things to itself. So it kind of again fades into the background. Hang on. Everyone will get a chance. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think the death adder does? Anyone with any ideas?
Is it
The
an ambush
death adder
predator?
looks like a verb.
It
So like
mimics rocks.
No, mimics rocks, yes, to some extent. Somebody said worm. Who was
yeah,
that?
it looks like a verb. So when a bird is trying to eat it or something, it's actually like a really poisonous animal, so it can attack the bird.
Fantastic. So yes, the death adder uses the tip of its tail and it moves it around like a worm. So it's literally, it's like fishing for birds on the ground. Okay. And when a bird or a mouse or whatever it is that likes eating worms comes near, the adder will strike and eat it up. Okay. What about this situation? This is a very interesting bird. How do you think it uses deception?
It can mimic
Ma'am,
other
it
bird
mimics
calls.
other voices.
Other bird
Okay.
calls.
All right. But how does it mimic and how does it, in what way is that a deception?
That is a deception.
Ma'am, they
because
think the
say the
drongo is
name it
another
has-
bird and they
what's
come
the
close to
call
it.
it is
Hang on,
making.
please. Everyone gets a
So
chance.
it's called-
Who's speaking right now?
Yeah, that was Aiden. So Anusha,
That is Aiden, okay.
why don't you share a name, and guys, let's unmute accordingly. Okay?
Let's do that. All right. Anvita's had her hand up. Anvita, would you like to say, tell us your thoughts on how the drongo uses deception?
Ma'am, I think that using its throat, it can like change like the voices.
No, that's not it. Good try though. Devna, you want to try?
Yes, ma'am. It mimics the voices of different birds, luring some of the prey, like smaller birds.
No. So it does mimic, yes, but it doesn't lure prey. Okay. Anagha?
I don't know about the African drongo, but ma'am, can I say tell some about another snake?
Let's keep that to the side. Right now, the question is about the African drongo. How does it use deception? So all of you guys have said it mimics, yes. But how does it mimic? What does it mimic? And what is the outcome? All right. Maharshi, why don't you give it a go?
So they use their different voices for sounding a false alarm.
Yes, correct. Fantastic. That hits the nail right on the spot. So these drongos are really cool. What they do is they mimic the alarm calls of other birds. And when these other birds hear the alarm calls, they'll drop whatever it is that they're eating and fly away. And then the drongo goes and picks up whatever it is that they've been eating and it gets a free meal. Okay. So really cool. Good job on that. Okay. Anglerfish. What do anglerfish do?
Ma'am, I think anglerfish shows its,
Hang on, no, stop. I have to give somebody a name and that person will answer, okay? Anu has not answered till now. So Anu, would you like to answer?
The anglerfish have a light on the front of their head and they use it to lure their prey because like the anglerfish are present in a very deep end of the. So this light is like a very bright illumination. Prey comes and then the anglerfish just eats them.
Fantastic. That's true. Okay. All right. A bolus spider. Has anyone heard of a bolus spider? And please tell me what it is that these bolus spiders do. Brishan, you want to give it a go?
So maybe a bola spider. No, I don't know about a bola spider. So
Okay, you don't know. Anyone else who actually knows what the bolus spider does? It's something very, very interesting and very cool.
Ma'am, I think I can remember it might do something. No, that was something.
No? Okay. Anyone else?
Ma'am, I think they use their string to capture other animals.
No. Janani, you want to try telling them what it
I'm
is?
not too sure, but because of its color, I think.
No, it's not color. It's not color.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So everyone put your hands down and we'll ask Janani if she knows.
Honestly, I also don't know.
You also don't know. Okay. Okay. Maharshi's, putting his hand up. That's the last person I'm going to ask. Do you have
so
something?
ma'am, they release a sticky fluid on their web.
No. How do they use deception here? It has nothing to do with sticky stuff. They do use that, but that is to, they catch their prey that way. So the bolus spider is really cool because it uses deception in the form of a scent. So it gives out a scent that makes it smell like a female moth. And male moths are attracted to this. And then what this fantastic spider does is it creates a lasso using its silk. and then it literally throws the lasso at the moth that is coming near it and reels it in and then eats it up. So that's where the deception for that bowler spider comes in. Okay, all right. Something very similar that happens with these fireflies. So there is a female firefly of the Photurus species. What she does is she mimics the light signals that are given out by the females of Photinus fireflies. And when these poor males come near this female, she'll grab them and eat them up. Okay, so these are these fantastic examples of how predators use deception to get their meals. Okay, right. So again, motivations on why they do what they do. I'd like you guys to think about it, and perhaps we'll come back to this later on in the presentation. Let's move on with stuff. Okay. So
quick,
and all of these different things. Sorry.
A quick time check, Anusha. So let's move to a Q&A time if that's feasible.
Sure. I think we can kind of shelve the coevolution part and maybe come back to it at a later stage. And let's have a discussion at this point of time. Shall we do that?
No, go ahead and do this, and maybe in 5 or 10 minutes we can move on.
All right, works. Okay. So now, guys, I would like you all to put on your listening ears. We're not going to have too much of a discussion. I'm going to quickly give you a lot of information, and hopefully it doesn't put you to sleep. Okay. So given that we've been talking about, how animals live with each other and how animals help each other, and in other cases, the animals also do stuff so that they can lure each other or protect themselves. There is a situation, well, not a situation, it is a phenomenon called evolution. Evolution is where animals change very slowly. A species changes very slowly over time. And what happens is sometimes these changes happen side by side with another species. So that is known as coevolution. And this is very common when animals have relationships such as predator-prey relationships, mutualism relationships, and other types of relationships. Okay. So essentially, evolution is a slow change in an organism caused because of changes in their genes and because of natural selection over very long periods of time. And this, for example, a basic example of how evolution happens is how flowers become colorful. Okay, so let's imagine, long ago, there was this one tree that decided to put out a very dull white or green color flower. But then it turns out that there are all these animals, birds and bees and butterflies that light colorful flowers. And, that tree, by chance, happened to put out a bunch of yellow flowers instead of just plain white flowers. And what happened is that that particular plant got a lot more visits and a lot more pollination. And because of that, it had a lot more babies. And because of that, slowly, generation by generation, the number of colorful flowers in that particular species of plant started to increase. Okay, and the flowers could be, the brightness of the flowers increased, their saturation increased, the hue increased, whatever, all of that happens. And side by side along with that, the vision of the pollinators also changed so that it made them easier for the pollinators to find the flowers. Okay, so coevolution, that's an example of coevolution, evolution that occurs simultaneously in 2 or more organisms because they affect each other. So in this example, the coevolution is between the color of the flower and the eyesight of the pollinator. Okay, right. Another example of coevolution, which I absolutely love, is the shape and size of a fig wasp head and the shape and size of these little holes called osteoles through which fig wasps enter the figs. So you see in this particular situation, one fig has slightly larger and broader osteole. And, you can see this is what the osteole looks like from the side. And the fig wasp head is also kind of broader. But in other figs where the osteole is really tiny and narrow, you can see that the fig wasp's head is also very, very narrow. Okay. Another example from that fig system is that fig smells. Okay, so the fig itself does not look very interesting. It's kind of green and lumpy. But the way that fig wasps find their figs is through smell. And each species of fig has this very unique scent that can attract its own species of wasp. Okay, yeah. So like I said, nature is this wonderful multiplayer game, and the goal of that game is survival. Okay. So there are situations where you've got, for example, predators and prey. You've got gazelle and you've got cheetahs. So the gazelle has to keep, running faster, and the cheetah also starts to run faster to keep up. And therefore, you have a situation where you have co-evolution between these two, and the co-evolution is to do with speed. Kill me if you can. So bacteria and fungi have this war happening where fungi produce antibiotics that kill off bacteria. And you've got some of these bacteria that also manage to become resistant to the fungi. Okay, and that's becoming a huge deal nowadays because you've got antibiotic resistant bacteria, which cause all sorts of problems in the medical field. Okay, eat me if you can. So monarch butterflies are these amazing things. So the plant decides one day that, I am going to pump myself full of toxins so that nothing can eat me. But then along comes this monarch butterfly and decides, oh, you know what? I'm not going to be bothered by the toxin. I'm going to eat the toxin. In fact, I'm going to do something even better. I'm going to take all that toxin and put it on my skin so that when birds try to eat me, they die. So you've got this amazing set of evolutionary things that happen where a plant is trying to do something, an animal reacts to it, and then it uses it for its own survival. Okay. Hide and seek. In the case of Luna moths, bats use a radar system to catch moths, which are their prey. But then there are these amazing Luna moths which have that extra tag on their tails. You can see that over there. And when they move, the tags flap in such a way that it actually throws off the bat's radar. So bats find it very difficult to catch and eat Luna moths. Okay. So these situations where you've got evolution happening in such a way that, animals are trying to outdo each other, it's actually got a name, and it's called an evolutionary arms race. All right. So I'm going to try and wrap up now. The final lesson here is that nature is not always random. There are so many strategies and responses, and biology is not facts. You just saw all of that right now. And some of the cool questions you can ask the next time you're faced with your biology book is, who does what? And if something happens, what will that effect be? Where do certain rules apply? Why is something the way it is? When do changes happen? And how do things become the way they are? So if you approach your biology lessons using these questions, things become a lot more fun. Okay. And again, to wrap up, nature plays games, organisms play hard, and they have to do that to survive. You have alliances, which are mutualisms. There are cheaters in these. There is always drama in nature, how partners tend to punish cheaters, and all that other stuff that we saw about how mimicry and all of that works. And again, going back to what I usually teach during my writing class is that always ask questions, and you can use the same questions that you can ask when you're trying to write a piece, which is who, what, where, why, when, and how. Right? And that's all, folks.
It's all fun now, but there's still more. So hang on, don't drop off the call. This is so much fun. So I'm going to open up the chat for a minute, okay? And if you enjoyed listening to this, if you learned something new, can you just put a yes in the chat? I want to hear, there's like 41 people. I want to see 41 yeses. Yeah? I want to check that everyone's awake and listening with us. Super. Oh, it's floating in. Yeah? This was an exciting and dramatic way of approaching biology. This is super fun, and I think, Anusha, we have a bunch of biology enthusiasts here, and so they really love doing that. I enjoyed fielding all the questions. Yay! Thank you, everybody. Okay, we can pause on the yeses.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot of yeses.
All right. Okay, pause. Good. So Anusha ma'am is teaching an interesting course coming up at Gifted World, and I'll take 2 minutes to show you about the course, and then we have a bunch of questions, Anusha, from the chat. As in the last section, we have like 5 or 6 questions to answer, and I'm sure more will pop up, and so we can jump into that as well. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. Yeah. Super. So starting on May 24th, there's an 8-day course that Anusha ma'am is running where we expand into these, ideas of what plays out in biology, and she will be running into storytelling based on that and a whole bunch of things. Anusha ma'am will explain the details in a minute. And this is for anyone from grades 4 to 8. And if you are, older than that and you're still interested, get in touch with us. We'll see what's possible to, do for you. Yeah. This will happen around the same time that the masterclass started today, just half an hour earlier. So it will be 4:30 p.m. GST or 6 p.m. IST to 7:30 p.m. IST, Indian Standard Time, or that's like 4:30 to 6 p.m. in the UAE. Yeah, and we'll talk about. Anusha, do you want to jump in and tell us what you'll be covering in the course?
Yeah, so I'll be covering mostly mutualisms in the course, and it is about alliances and partnerships in nature. And what I've done is that I think we're going to have 5 classes, correct, Janani?
Yeah.
So for each of the 5 classes, we are going to explore a specific kind of mutualism. So the first class, for example, is going to be about nursery mutualisms, okay, where plants farm their pollinators. The second one is going to be perhaps about housing for protection kind of mutualisms. The third one could be for cleaning versus protection mutualisms, or cleaning versus something else. Okay, so I've got these 5 different types of mutualisms, and on each day we're going to cover them. And the really cool part is going to be at the end of each class, where I'm going to ask you guys to do an assignment question. And each assignment question will not just test what you've understood from that topic, but will also test your storytelling characteristic, your storytelling abilities, because you have to tell me, the assignment questions are written in such a way that you have to write it in the form of a story. Okay, so you guys will have to do 2 things here. One is, of course, listen to me and what I'm trying to tell you and gain as much information from that. The second thing I want you guys to do is think about how you would gauge that situation and then communicate it back to me using a story. Okay, right. So that's it about my course, Janani.
Yeah, there's anyone who has questions, we will get into that. So just quickly, just to let you know, the course is paid. You also get a certificate at the end of it. And I've put the link to the course and a coupon code just for you guys in the chat. So if you're interested in doing that, we can do it. Also, I'm going to launch a poll now, okay? This is a quick poll. If you're interested in talking more about the course, if you're curious to see what the course is about, or you want to know a little bit more details about it, or you're generally interested in it, can you fill that poll, and we'll get back to you after the class also, and we can chat about it. Yeah. So if
I didn't understand the first question. What are we supposed to write?
Your name.
My name. Oh.
Yeah. So if the course is interesting for you, you can fill this in. And there's a bunch of questions that we can ask. So Anusha, while this is getting filled, let me ask you some of these questions in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah. Wait. We have to scroll past the yeses. Okay, there you go. Yes, so Sachin has a bunch of questions. So let me start with one. What with the color? With the color change for flowers, does the property of the flower change at all?
Yes.
Evolution.
Yeah, so it's not just the color. I just took that as an example, but color, flower, sorry, what am I saying? Sorry, the flower shape and the amount of nectar, the kind of scent that the flower sends out, all of those can also change, because again, these are examples that we kind of pick out and try to give you to make things simple, but nothing is really that simple in nature. It's always a bunch of things that happen together, and pollinators don't just use vision to find flowers. They also use smell, and a lot of cases they actually use touch also. So yes, a lot of other changes that happen alongside color change.
Super. So how do monarch butterflies survive the toxins, Anusha?
Okay, so that I will have to go back and read up a bit on my biology. But if I remember right, they tend to sequester the poison. And they kind of, the way the poison works is that it has to be chemically changed, and it affects the cells. But monarch butterflies stop that chemical reaction that converts the poison into the form that will affect them. And by doing that, they actually manage to, collect all of the poison and spread it over their bodies, so that if something else eats them, they get the poison. But these guys are perfectly fine. They're not affected by the poison.
Interesting. Yeah. So then, why does a baby cheetah look like a honey badger?
I don't I'm not sure why. Sorry, I don't think I have an answer for that. But if that actually is true, then it makes sense. Honey badgers are absolutely terrifying animals. So if a baby cheetah looks, so for its size, a honey badger can do a lot of damage in terms of, when it fights with another animal. So if a baby cheetah actually looks like a honey badger, it's all good, because then anything that looks at it is going to think twice, thrice, perhaps 100 times before it approaches it and tries to pick a fight with it.
If you allow me to, I
Go
might
ahead.
be able to answer that question.
Okay.
So when it comes to cheetahs, they usually live in conjunction with lions and other apex predators in their habitats. So when it comes to apex predators, they usually tend to compete with each other for prey and territory. So when cheetahs live in the first years of their lives, cheetahs are very vulnerable, and when their parents go out to hunt, they have no protection. Honey badgers, lions do not mess with honey badgers at all. So
Exactly. Nothing does, as far as I know. Honey badgers are really, really feared.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting theory as well, Raghav. Thank you. So also, Sachin has an interesting, insightful question, I feel. So why do they challenge others to kill them when the goal is to survive? Is his question. What I think what he's referring to is in the slides. You said something like "eat me if you can."
That way. Okay. Yeah, but that is a situation where you have a predator and a prey. So eat me if you can is that the prey is taunting the predator, telling the predator, because the predator has no other option but to eat. The cheetah cannot live off of plants. So it has to eat meat, which unfortunately happens to be the gazelle. So the gazelle is, well, in this particular case, I'm just trying to put it like a cartoon here, where the gazelle is saying, nya, 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 I can run really, really fast. What are you going to do about it? That's where the idea of eat me if you can comes in. Okay, so it's not literal, it's just me being very storytelling type.
So do lichen harm trees or help them?
As far as I know, lichens are kind of commensals. Okay, as in they live, it's a symbiosis where the lichen and the tree live together, but they don't really affect each other. So it's just that lichens tend to use the tree as a support system to grow on. But as far as I know, they don't really harm the trees.
Yes. Then Anaga wanted to share a fact. Anaga, are you here? I think she may have dropped off by now. Okay. Then Sachin again has another question. Do they put colors in the root is his question. And I wonder if you can walk us through thinking through that rather than giving us the answer. I feel like there's a reason why. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So Sachin will have to unmute and answer a couple of questions from me. So first and foremost, who is the they?
You said some insects come to flowers and change their colors and their property. So do they change, means do they directly land on the flowers and change their colors, or do they attack on the roots and change the colors?
No, none of that. So what I was trying to explain with that example is that when a pollinator, or an insect or a bird visits a flower to pollinate it, it is attracted to the flower because of a particular color or because of something, that is there in the flower. Okay. And the pollinator, because of that, interaction with the animal, with the plant, it drives the evolution of different types of colors. Okay. So the change that happens is over an evolutionary scale. That is over many, many, many generations. So it's not immediate. No, so the pollinator doesn't do anything immediate to a flower to make it change color or whatever. Though coming back to that, there are flowers that change color once they are pollinated. Okay. So for example, there are some flowers that are bright red in color. Okay, before they are pollinated. So it's almost like the plant is sending out a signal saying, look, this flower is ready to be pollinated. It's full of nectar. Why don't you come? So a pollinator will come, take the nectar, pollinate the flower and go away. And now the plant just wants to tell the pollinators, look, there's no more nectar, nothing over here. And the flower sometimes changes color to white. And that's not very attractive. Okay. So there are these short-term changes that happen. And there are long-term changes, which is on an evolutionary scale. Okay.
Good. So
ma'am.
another fact that you wanted to share is there's a kind of snake where the tail looks like its head, and when it's attacked, it puts its head under its body and raises its tail.
Yes, you're right about that. That's really cool. It's better to lose a tail than lose the head, right? It's easier to regrow one or live life without one rather than the other. That's a cool example. Yes.
Raghav, did you have a response to that?
No. I just wanted to ask, could you name the flower that changes color after it's pollinated?
No, not off the top of my head. I'm sorry. I will have to think about it.
Are you perchance talking about Hibiscus mutabilis, color changing rose, or so it's called?
It could be. There are many flowers that do that.
But that changes color as it progresses through the day. I mean, it changes color in the way you described it.
So Raghav, I know
okay.
plants that do this. One whose name I'm forgetting, but the other one is Madhumalati, the
Okay.
raccoon creeper. After it's pollinated, it changes color and droops down.
Oh, right.
Oh, hang on. So apparently our lovely, what is this? Lantana also does it. So apparently lantana changed their colors after pollination. I didn't know this about Madhumalati because I have a huge Madhumalati creeper, but I've never seen anything pollinate them. But I've seen them changing color. So I didn't know it was a pollination induced thing.
I will double check, but as far as I know, that's the case.
Hang on. And there is also another very interesting thing that happens with this color change. Sometimes plants are really clever and they want to leverage everything that they can use in their environment to help with pollination. So some flowers are one color during the day so that they attract butterflies and birds for pollination. And they change color and smell at night so that they can attract night pollinators, which would be bats and moths. So you have that situation also. So it's just crazy.
Fun. When I get the answer, Raghav, I will share it. I'm forgetting the name of a tree that does this as well.
Sure.
So Aiden asks, polyps only come out at night. Why do they come out? Do you mean tulips? What is polyps, Aiden? Do you know what? Anusha, do you know what he's referring to?
Polyps, as far as I know, I only know polyps in the context of jellyfish polyps, which are their dispersal forms, as in their reproductive forms. I think that's to do with their
Polyps are the coral.
Yeah,
In
there
the
are
coral
coral
polyps,
polyps, and then there are also jellyfish polyps, which is their non-reproductive form, actually. Medusa is the reproductive.
Is it? Okay, I've forgotten
I'm
my
quite sure.
biology over there. Okay, all right. Yeah, so what polyps were you talking about, Aiden?
Coral polyps.
Coral polyps. I don't think they come out only at night. Do they?
Interesting question to take back. I guess we can do a little research and reconnect on that.
We need to do that, yeah.
Alishba asks, can you tell in detail how a pollinator really pollinates?
Okay, I can give you one example. In a lot of cases, a pollinator, what it does is that it tries to fight its way through the plant down to the nectary where they want nectar. Okay, and in that process, the plant will rub off its pollen on the back, on the head, or on the wings of the pollinator. And when that pollinator moves to another plant or to another flower on the same plant, and they're going through that same process of trying to get the nectar, okay, the pollen that's there on their backs or their heads or wherever, that brushes off on the stigma of the other flower that they visit. Sometimes what happens is they also transfer pollen from the same flower onto the stigma of the same flower. So a lot of stuff that can happen, and that's how pollination happens. Does that answer her question?
Super. Then Maharshi shares a fact. Cockroaches can live without their heads for 2 weeks.
speak.
Thank you for that fact, Marshi. Then
I think Raghav has answered that, there's Thespesia populnea, which changes color with pollen.
No, actually, that is her answer to me.
yeah, I tagged him.
Okay, sorry, Janani, that's you. Sorry.
Super.
Okay.
Yeah, Maharshi has done the research on polyps. Thank you. I think the lack of the why, like I didn't connect the words. Then, so earlier in the chat, someone had shared, I had asked whether the pitcher plant and a bee was a co-evolution or symbiosis. And I found here as I read it that and I saw that it wasn't a pitcher plant, but it was a bucket orchid and it is a co-evolution. I think this is just a stream of thought sharing what is happening. And Raghav, you had put in a message that says bacteriophages and bacteria. Was that a response to a question? Is that a question that you had?
No, it was just another example I'd offered for evolutionary arms race.
Okay, yes. That's a fantastic example, yes.
Super. Pollinators collect the flower's pollens via anthers and move it to the stigma. Okay, yeah, Rishan is sharing about what he knows about pollination. That's great. I think we are through with the questions. Super.
Wow, time.
I really enjoyed chatting with you guys. I think there's a bunch of thoughts and I have an idea for some resources that we can share with you, some books and names of websites that are there. We can pull that together in the email. Look out for an email after the masterclass from us and we can share that. So Alishba shares just an example if you want to say anything about it, Anusha. The mosquitoes that bite and suck our blood are female as they need the energy to lay eggs, while mates feed on nectar and
Nectar. If I remember right, there was some really cool research that showed that males are also pollinators. Male mosquitoes can be pollinators.
Right. Interesting. It's hard to imagine that these things are helpful, but I'm sure that.
Yeah, somewhere at some point of time, something has decided to make friends with them. So that's all you can say.
Yes. There's this very famous quote from, which is often attributed to Mandela, which is someone who feels like a single individual cannot make a difference has never been shut in a room with a mosquito. Yeah.
Some insect that eats mom and born. Oh, good Lord, no. You're going into macabre.
Yeah, Vishal, I think there are other examples of animals that eat each other, but
Yeah.
not any of this, as far as I know.
There is actually. There is
I
a,
remember
after
hearing
sunset.
about one insect with
Is it? Okay, yeah, we will look it up.
it's called matophagy. And it's quite common among some species of spiders and
The cat insects on the young on the back and then
mantis, the praying mantises do that, but
Oh,
that is they
mantis
eat
is-
their husbands,
oh yeah, that's sexual.
not their moms.
all right. And on this beautiful
Yeah.
we shall end the recording for the masterclass.